And thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. Welcome to the program every afternoon, 12 noon Eastern Standard, live Monday through Friday, and archived in all of our affiliate podcasts. And my guest is Lee Smith. He is the author of The Permanent Coup: How Enemies, Foreign and Domestic, Targeted the American President. Lee, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me on, Charles. I really appreciate it. Nice to see you.
Same here. I noticed that you're a former editor at the Village Voice in New York. Is that right?
Yes,
So
that's
you,
correct.
so they can't accuse you of being some kind of a right-wing nut.
Well, no, I mean, sure, anyone can say that. Look, I mean, I don't see this. I haven't seen it for a while in terms of political partisanship. I think that's not what we've seen unfolding here the last several years. So yeah, I think
Right.
those terms have become sort of irrelevant right now.
It is in the real sense, but in the practical sense, it's very
Yeah,
polarized in terms of how people see this issue, and issues that
yeah,
traditionally would have been anathema to the left are now
yeah.
permissible, like spying on political opponents and using.
Permissible. They're permissible. They're celebrated.
Yep.
That's what I mean. And this is one of the things that has led to again, the total dissolution of these partisan barriers. So you're looking at people. There are people on the left still who are not many, but people who are appalled by what we've seen unfold over the last 4 years now. But yeah, unfortunately, if you're looking at the at what we used to know as the liberal media, it now appears that so long as it's a Republican president who's getting who's being targeted for a coup, that's okay.
Yeah, the ends justify the means, and but I
Yeah.
just want to also mention that probably the most
Uh,
egregious example is seeing a 68-year-old man who'd never been accused of a crime taken out of his home in
uh,
Florida by 27 clad policemen looking like ninja turtles, and having CNN
yeah,
film the whole thing on the front lawn, and having the
right.
liberals celebrating this and thought, oh, this
Yeah,
is, it kind of, you'd think conventionally would run contrary to everything that they allegedly stand for.
right.
Now, this book,
Well,
I want to get into the background of the of
okay.
what you call the permanent coup. But before we do, I want to just bring
Yeah,
things up to today, because there's an election now in about 40 days from now,
hmm,
and you have members of and former members of the military, like Mattis and others,
hmm,
making noises about not stopping or taking the president out of the office by force,
right.
and stuff like that. I mean, the kind of stuff that you might see happen in a third world country. Almost like a
Yes,
military threat. How serious a problem
absolutely.
is that, and what is going on with that?
It's a very serious. It's obviously a very serious problem because, as you describe it, it's like a third world. It's like a third world military junta or a military junta in waiting. And unfortunately, uh, Mr. Mattis has made this. I mean, again, he's made it quite clear, whether this is through different leaks to people, whether it's through his own public statements. I mean, the idea that the president has to be taken out, his efforts to destabilize the U.S. government. I mean, Mattis and his partners can talk about going after the Trump administration, or they can phrase it however they want. The reality is, right now, they're looking to destabilize the U.S. government, and it appears that they are threatening. They are threatening at least a military. They're not in the military anymore. So the question is, how much reach do they have into the still current military and into current Pentagon officials? Yeah, it's extremely disconcerting.
And I think that the it looks by as an outsider like they do have some reach into the military after many years, if not decades, of kind of political operatives rising to very high levels
Right.
in the military, and that this is not something that should be viewed lightly in
Uh,
this time, in this day
not
and
at all.
age.
No.
We didn't expect the country to go under a lockdown with the coronavirus, and yet that's happened. Nor did we expect people, organized groups to be burning black neighborhoods and looting black
Yeah.
businesses in major cities, but that's
Going back
happening.
to 4 years ago, we didn't expect to see our intelligence services partnering with the press to run an operation against against the official who holds the highest elected office in the land. None of these things were expected. The way the country has gone is extremely surprising, even though we knew of concepts and ideas and facts such as the deep state or the permanent bureaucracy, however people want to put it. But no, I don't think that people had any idea that this kind of thing was possible. Though perhaps we should have
Well, I mean,
after 8 years of Barack Obama.
perhaps, but these are charges that are very serious, Lee Smith, and you cover them very thoroughly in your book, very well
Mm,
documented. And that gets to the origins of what
yeah,
you call the permanent coup,
yeah,
the spying on the Trump campaign by using
right,
a phony dossier to get the FISA
yeah,
court to agree, and that dossier was signed off on by the FBI director at the time, James Comey, and others, and that this was for the purpose of spying on the Trump campaign. And the
right,
premise, which they continue to push, is that President Trump, at that time
yeah,
candidate Trump, was a Russian spy. I mean, this is
hmm,
an incredible conspiracy theory, and
yes, it is.
they
Yeah,
concocted this dossier as a way to use that and to claim that to spy on his campaign. Now, again, this
right,
is something that is 10 times worse than anything Richard Nixon did with the wiretapping. I mean, this is, the most egregious kind of violation of every principle
yeah,
that you might have in a free election,
right,
and that Obama and Biden were in on it, and that
right.
as was the top brass. So give us the origins of this.
Yeah, well, there's another big difference here. I mean, I agree that it's worse than what Nixon did in Watergate, because again, with Watergate, the break-in was engineered by former CIA and former FBI. Right now, we're looking at the people behind, the campaign to spy on Donald Trump. These were active FBI officials. This was the director of the CIA, the director of the FBI. So these people were still employed in the employment of the United States government. So yeah, that's terrible, and it makes it much worse. The big difference, the way that I see it, is because the people who are the heroes of Watergate, of course, is the press, the media, in particular, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who who covered this story and said how terrible it was, what Richard Nixon, what his administration had done, spying on another campaign and then trying to cover it up. So the big difference is that the big difference is the hero of the Watergate story was actually the press. If Nixon was the bad guy, the hero was the press. What do we have now? We have the press now has partnered with the spies. Okay, that's the real big difference. In fact, without the press, this operation never could have happened, right? The Watergate break-in happened. They hired, people from the plumbers, from the, what they were called as the White House plumbers, to go in there and to bug DNC headquarters at the Watergate Hotel. What we have here is an information operation that would not have been possible without the press. So that's the really enormous difference to my mind. And that's what makes it so much worse, because again, it's not the press's role to keep elected officials in check, but it is the press's role to inform the American public so the American public can make decisions. The press over the last 4 years, even longer, but certainly the last 4 years over the course of the events we're talking about, has played the exact opposite role. Their job has been to obfuscate facts, to conceal events. So that's what's very different, and that's what's extremely dangerous. And we see that continuing to go on today, right? When we hear people talking about the raising and looting of American cities, of most major American cities, starting at the end of May with the George Floyd riots, we see how this has been covered in the press, right? The whole idea of the mostly peaceful protest. So you can actually find honest interlocutors, independents or Democrats even, who, given the media that they consume, whether it's the Washington Post or CNN, they will have no idea of some of the things that have been going on in these different places. They actually believe that what we're watching are civil rights protests and people who are out demanding more responsible policing, when this is not what's happened at all. What we've seen are organized, coordinated operations to go after American cities. And the defund the police thing, this has constituted a threat to order and stability of the country. So again, the press has played the central role here over the last 4 years of what's happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think they overstepped themselves with the looting and burning when they actually had reporters stand out there and say, "These are mostly peaceful protests," and in the background you see buildings burning to the ground and blowing up. So, to me, that's a very telling moment, and I think that
Yeah,
most Americans did see that. You're quite right. The press has
yeah,
been just a rubber stamp for this whole thing. I mean, they've Rachel Maddow is maybe the most egregious example, but they do it's pure propaganda in
uh,
terms of telling a part of a story that fits their narrative and
right.
ignoring the parts that don't, and then
Mm,
amplifying. I mean, it's the first time the media has become so irresponsible that they will go out with a single anonymous source
right.
to front
Look,
page New York Times.
if you'll excuse me, but I think the distinction is very important. Many people describe the press now as irresponsible or lazy, as unprofessional, whatever. That's not what we're looking at, right? I know my father was a journalist, my grandfather, my great grandfather. I know this profession. As we started off by speaking about the Village Voice, right? I'm familiar with the fact that the press has always or long leaned to the left, right? That's fine. We're not talking about a partisan press. We're not talking about a lazy press or even a complicit press. We're talking about a platform for operations coming from one political faction targeting the other. That's what it is. This is no longer a press in any way that we as Americans have understood it for at least a century. This is the press only in the way that it's understood in third world countries. So I'm certainly not trying to be captious. I just want to
Not at
make
all.
clear that that people understand what we're looking at here and why, for instance, as you said, when a reporter is standing in front of a burning building, it's like, yeah, the protests are totally peaceful. I don't know what you're talking about. That
Mm,
explains it, right?
it
Because
does. Yeah.
otherwise you think they're crazy. People made fun of. You remember in the Iraq War, the second Iraq War,
Hmm.
people made fun of Baghdad Bob, Saddam Hussein's spokesman, right?
Yeah.
Like the guy
Right.
is obviously lying. Things are happening over his shoulder. This is where we are right now. And what that was a third world media, Iraqi media, Arab media, it's changing now. But like all third world media, it just serves the purpose of the ruling establishment, the ruling regime to push information operations. Bizarrely, that's exactly where we are right now in the United States. So it's very important I think, for your audience to understand how far gone we are as as
Oh
a
yeah. I
country
mean,
having a
it's
serviceable media.
I mean, I think that we can see the President Trump was right to talk about fake media and talk about the hoaxes
Hmm.
that they cooked up one hoax after another, whether it be the Charlottesville hoax or whether it be,
Oh,
that he criticized somebody who was disabled, which was a hoax.
yeah, right.
And if you dig the surface, you find that these are things that are created and then amplified by really the media that we have come to
Oh,
respect. I mean, in most cases,
mm,
the big three. You
mm,
watch the. I mean, I don't mean to single them out, but Lester Holt is an example. The most people still get their news from the 6 o'clock news,
yes,
and
they
all
do.
three
Wow.
networks spend a whole segment talking about the fact that President Trump ordered an extra scoop of ice cream at a state dinner.
Right.
That was supposed. Oh my God! And it's so trivial and so negative. It's one thing to criticize legitimately, and even to say you don't like some particular
No.
political leader, but the level of negativity at the exclusion of legitimate stories, like the Abraham Accords, which should have been. I mean, the front
Yeah,
page.
that's a very big deal.
You
I
think
agree.
that would be? I mean,
It's
if it was
it's a very
Obama.
it's a very big deal given the template that's been set in Washington and by the political class over the last half century, right?
Yeah,
This is
of
with the
course.
Palestinian Israeli peace is the most important thing in the world. And look, everyone's trying it. Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and George W. Bush must do it. This is the key to peace, the world peace, not just Middle East peace, but to the world. And here's Donald Trump, and he goes, his administration, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, goes and pulls very, very impressive feat, normalizes relations between Israel and actual Arabs, powerful, wealthy, oil rich Arab states that are enthusiastic about exchanges with Israel,
Mm.
cultural, economic, educational. I agree. It's a very big
Yeah.
deal. Should that have been covered instead of it having it be dismissed? Oh, it's not a big deal. Yes, and that goes to part of the nature. Partly, it's the nature of the political class. The other part, again, is that the press. The press's job right now is to work with is as part of the establishment. It's to destroy Donald Trump, right? For 4 years, that's been the job, and that's what the book is about. The Permanent Coup,
Hmm.
4 year long, 4 year long, an ongoing operation to destroy Donald Trump, to push
Yep.
him out of office, to undo the 2016 election, and now at this point to ensure that he is not reelected. And if he is reelected, I'm sure you and your audience have all heard the different threats. We're going to
Oh
take to
yeah.
the streets. We're going to burn everything down. We're going to Joe Biden must never concede defeat. And we're going
Mm.
to litigate it with 600 lawyers. We're going to send our frontline militias out to the street to bring things down again. Michelle Obama says this, Joe Biden, the press. I mean, so
It's
that's
like
where
a
we are.
it's like
Yeah.
a color revolution in Eastern Europe.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
if you've been following Revolver, a new online publication, which is really
Yeah.
excellent, that's what they're saying. And also, I mentioned that in my book too. I liken it to what we've been seeing the last several months here, is close to a color revolution. Actually, and indeed, many of the same people are involved, and you see many of the
Exactly.
same tactics and methods to try to bring down an American government the way that the American government has tried to sometimes successfully, it appears, has overturned different governments, especially in Eastern Europe.
So they were able to get a special prosecutor appointed because
Yeah.
President Trump did what every president has the right to do:
Uh,
fire an FBI director.
yes, sure.
Somehow this was seen as criminal, and then you had this weak attorney general who stepped
Yeah.
aside and allowed an underling to appoint
Yeah.
Mueller, and Mueller's protege then turns out to be the guy that's now appointed and running the FBI.
Right.
Mueller then
Wow.
drags the country through 2 years of innuendo and thug tactics
Yeah.
against people who did nothing to do with Trump.
Yeah.
And the media would breathlessly report this every day. Every day, I
Yeah.
mean, I get bulletins from the Boston Globe, where I
Yeah.
live. Oh my,
Right.
big story coming out, and it
Yeah.
would turn out to be nothing. It would disappear. And
Yeah.
this went on for 2 years. It was very distracting for the
Mhm.
country, and it really served the purpose of
Yeah.
trying to stifle the elected government, the government that we elected,
That was the
and their
point.
agenda.
All right, that's the point.
Exactly.
That's what I argue in the Permanent Coup. I mean, there was a real. It wasn't just deep state operatives who were trying to, who were causing trouble, fighting for the interest of the FBI. I mean, the real purpose was to obstruct Donald Trump with the hopes of toppling him from office in order to preserve the policies and policy preferences of Barack Obama, until Obama could find an acolyte who would come and complete his task of transforming America. And that's what we're seeing right now in the election. I mean, everyone has seen Joe Biden and all of the different jokes and all of the peculiar defenses of Joe Biden, who's clearly not there.
Mm.
Joe Biden is an avatar for an Obama third term, right? So
Right, right.
that's what's happening. Now this is the actual right now. This was the purpose of the coup, to hold everything down until there was a chance to get rid of Trump. And so there's a lot riding on the 2020 election.
There certainly is. And then after, of course, the Mueller thing collapsed,
Yeah.
then basically from what I understand, Nancy Pelosi went to the media or was
Yeah.
contacted to see if they would back them up with an impeachment
Oh, well, I
inquiry
mean,
over the
yeah,
the perfect phone call. And I think that, let me
there would
just
be
say,
no question. Yeah.
yeah, but that perfect phone call and that the hearings to that impeachment,
Mm.
I think brought out exactly what you're saying. You had people come up who would fill with all these innuendos, and their
Right.
basic complaint and their testimony was, "Well, we don't like President Trump's
Right.
policy." It had nothing to do with
Yeah.
anything impeachable. He was elected. I mean, they're just appointed officials. If they don't like his
Right.
policy, they could resign and write a book. but
right,
instead they're testifying as if somehow this was some sort of a crime. To my way of
right.
thinking, that is the most revealing element of
Uh,
this whole coup. The fact that testimony in the, with the perfect phone call, oh, well, we want him impeached because we don't like his
right.
policy in Ukraine. Hello. I mean, that's his right. He's
Yeah,
the president of the United
right.
States.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, there's a big problem here, and I imagine I'll just mention it right now. Talking about the John Durham investigation,
Thank you.
people
Yeah.
want to know if there's going to be, people are going to be charged. I mean, I am still optimistic people will be charged, but what's happened? I mean, this is that. I mean, that started before the election, late 2015, early 2016, because no one has paid a price for this, right? Because no one has been um, I mean, one of the FBI lawyers, Kevin Kleinsmith, made a plea agreement, but because no one has been charged, no one has paid the price. I mean, frankly, it's been an invitation for people to walk in and obstruct the government. And this is what the impeachment was like. Hey, well, if Trump's not doing anything, if no one's going to stop us, if there's no price to be paid, why not just take a free shot at the president? So that's what's been going on, and this president has not been well served by many of the people who have worked under him and his administration. And I think we started the conversation by talking about people like James Mattis. James Mattis is certainly one of them. I mean, these are people who have left the administration now, and again, their purpose is to destabilize the U.S. government, which is a disaster for the entire country. I know that people are cheering them on because they think this is a good thing. This will only lead to more chaos. The only reason that this country is at peace now is because people on the right and Trump supporters still believe in the Constitution, and they still believe that they have still believe that the vote changes things, that that's the way to affect political change in America, by the vote. The other half of the country tragically does not believe that. They believe the way to affect change is by rigging the system, spying on opponents, sending people out to the streets to terrorize their fellow Americans. And someday that may change. And if that does change, we're going to be going into we are going into dangerous territory now. But again, the only reason that this country is at peace right now is because one half of the country is still abiding by the agreement that we make as Americans. Things like the peaceful transition of power, things like your vote matters. And if you look at the argument right now of the Supreme over whether or not Trump should nominate and then have confirmed the Supreme Court justice, I mean, it's preposterous. I mean, yes, he's the president. He was elected. There's a Republican majority in the Senate. Why wouldn't he do that?
Of
So
course. And meanwhile,
it's just bizarre.
they're rioting over the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, what did they
Right,
expect her to not die? I mean, like something happened.
right.
Now, the Durham committee, I mean, what's the deal with that? I mean, they came in with this great ideal. I mean, he was a prosecutor against the mob in Boston
Yeah,
and against the corrupt FBI agents. I mean, he had a very nonpartisan. He'd worked for the Obama administration,
yeah.
and there was a lot of hope that he would finally bring this thing to justice. It's now been, I think, 8 months and
No,
nothing much.
it's been longer than that. I mean, the announcements about his appointments was May 2019, so it's been a year and a half, maybe a little longer. I'm not entirely clear.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm still optimistic that there will be charges, that things are moving on that front. But as I say, in the meantime, things are moving very quickly. I mean, the the people
Not
in
too
the
quick
country.
with Durham. I
No,
mean,
but what I'm saying is other things are moving
right?
quickly, right? Whether, as
Yeah,
you talked
exactly.
before about impeachment, we're talking about rioting, we're talking about the weaponization of the coronavirus. So things are moving all around us, and we're still looking back to 2016 to see if something's going to happen there. Again, I believe it will, but how will that affect the things that have already, gone
Right.
on?
I mean, I suppose we have to. I mean, with the impending election, the
Yeah,
issues are really now in front of us, and there is an agenda afoot, and some of these
right.
judges are backing it to allow for
Yeah,
hundreds of thousands of ballots to simply be mailed out
yeah,
to people's cats. I mean,
right.
what do you see
Yeah.
happening with that? Right?
Well, I don't know. I see the cats going mostly for Trump.
Oh,
Uh,
that's good.
yeah. Um, No, I mean, I think that's I mean, the actual purpose is to sow chaos, right? I mean, that's the actual thing that they're doing. It's not just to of course, I mean, the vote by mail is a recipe for voter fraud. Everyone, as Barr said on the Mark Levin show, said everyone has known this until the Trump administration. So we all know that vote by mail is a recipe for voter fraud. But you look at how it's happening. It's not just about voter fraud. It's to create chaos. And then their hope is to take advantage of that chaos and again add to it. And this will be through the different lawyers that the Biden campaign will be using to litigate virtually certainly every swing state, every swing state that Joe Biden does not win, and again to start burning things in the streets of major American cities. I'm not sure what effect that will have. Right? I mean, frontline blue militias like BLM and Antifa continuing to burn down blue cities. How is that going to affect the rest of the country? Will the rest of the country say, "Oh, well, hey, if these guys are going to continue to keep burning, New York City and Portland, let them have the election"? I don't think that's likely. I don't believe that's
I
going
don't
to happen.
understand, and I
No,
don't understand the political wisdom behind that. And I think there's a lot of evidence
yeah,
that people like George Soros are financing it. And
no.
yet, I would think that there would be a major backlash. People want law and order. I think it
I
could
th- I
actually.
I I think there is
I
a
mean, it could
backlash,
turn New
actually.
Jersey
Yeah,
and New York could go blue. I mean, could go red.
yeah. Well, that's I mean, look, a lot of people have left New York City. So
Right.
I mean, there are other factors here aside from the polls. I know that people question the integrity of polling, and that's fair. And there are other numbers that matter here, and that's one of them. How many people have left places like New York City? Also, gun purchases, right? People
Oh
are
yeah.
concerned. So I think that this has had an effect. I think people have looked at it, and once people realize these protests were not mostly peaceful, but that
Yeah.
everything
Exactly.
from murder to arson to assault people have responded. Our
I
neighbors, our
hope so.
fellow Americans are rational people. No one, but most people, especially most Americans, do not like that instability, do not like that chaos, that violence. And
Which makes me
we've
wonder
seen as a
what
crime
they have in
spree.
mind. Yeah, I mean, how do they think this is going to help them? I mean, I guess that maybe it's the Cloward-Piven thesis of the
Uh,
1960s, which was overload the system so much that it implodes. And the organization Acorn tried to do this in every election. They would
yeah.
fill the ballots with phony ballots and registrations with phony, ballots and names as a way to implode the
Yeah.
system. Maybe that's what
And
they're trying to do here.
no, I think that what they've done is they've used all these different cities as sound stages. Again, if we're talking about color revolutions, right? America is a much bigger, United States is a much bigger country than Ukraine, and the media spectacle was strictly in Kiev, right? That's where the fight was. So that's what we're seeing now. I mean, there's only a few places. I mean, all the Democrats can do, all the DNC can do is use their own cities, right? Once they were to move out of their own cities and try to burn things down, they wouldn't fare very well, right? So the only places they can go are into their own cities, and they're
Mm.
using them again as a number of sound stages to show that people are unhappy with Donald Trump, that Donald Trump's a racist, that Donald Trump is unfair, and
Right. Not a
again,
nice guy.
it's for. And that's why the media has had to shape it that these are peaceful protests, right? Not
Mhm.
that things are getting burned to the ground, but that you have people protesting across the country in every city. But of course, now we understand these are not peaceful protests.
So, Lee Smith, what do you see happening? I mean, and not to put on a crystal ball
Yeah.
here, but do you think that President Trump is going to survive it on election day?
Survive? Do you mean will he be
Will he be
reelected?
reelected?
I mean, yeah, I'd rather not look into the crystal ball I don't have. But as I said, I mean, if we're talking about I mean, people are certainly upset about the violence, right? And insofar as people will continue to associate that violence and that violence, that chaos, with the Democrats who, I mean, who own the chaos now. Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to affect how voters respond for sure.
I
Yeah.
hope so. All right, Lee Smith. The book is "The Permanent Coup: The How Enemies, Foreign and Domestic, Targeted the American President." Lee, where is it available? And do you want to give out information about where people can read your articles?
I always like to encourage people to go to their local independent bookseller if they have them, especially now with the
Mhm.
coronavirus. I mean, our our neighbors who run small businesses are having a hard time. So I
Yeah.
hope they'll go to them if they can. Of course, there's all sorts of online sellers, Amazon and Barnes and Noble. But please, if you can, patronize your uh, local independent bookseller. I'm on Twitter at Lee Smith DC, also Parlor Lee Smith DC, and so you can follow my work there. Thank
Excellent.
you very much, Charles, for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lee. Great talking with you. Thanks so
Thank you.
much. All
Thanks.
right.
Bye bye.
Bye
Talk to you
bye. Have
soon.
a good